High Council fell silent when Empress Valithra raised her hand. Not the respectful silence of deference, the brittle silence of barely contained outrage. "You cannot be serious," Lord Caven said, his silver scales rippling with disgust. "A human? As your bonded consort?" Marcus Cole stood at the center of the crystalline chamber, acutely aware that every being present could crush him with a thought. He was 34 years old, a former agricultural engineer from a human colony that no longer existed, and he was wearing borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit. The ceremonial robes of a potential consort hung loose on his shoulders. They had been tailored for Valithran males, who averaged 8 feet tall. He barely reached 6. "I am entirely serious," Valithra replied. Her voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of unbroken imperial lineage. She sat upon the throne of 7 stars, her obsidian skin gleaming with bioluminescent patterns that shifted with her mood. Currently, they pulsed a cold, warning blue. "The human has passed every trial. He has earned the right to stand before me." "Earned?" Lady Sivalith laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "He survived the trials because we designed them for beings of worth. We never anticipated that something so." Marcus said nothing. He had learned in his 18 months among the Valithran that silence was often the wisest response. They respected restraint. They despised desperation. But God, he was tired. The trials had nearly killed him. 3 times he had felt his heart stop. Twice he had watched his own blood freeze in the vacuum of space before emergency systems saved him. Once he had held a dying Valithran child in his arms during a pirate attack, shielding her with his body while her own people debated whether rescuing a human was worth the political cost. They had rescued him, eventually, but only because the child's mother was a minor noble who valued her daughter more than protocol. "The human," Lord Caven continued, "has no lineage, no holdings, no genetic value. His species has been part of the galactic community for less than a century. They have nothing to offer." "They have him," Valithra said quietly. The chamber fell silent again. This time, Marcus could feel the shift, confusion replacing contempt. The Empress had never spoken of any suitor with such simplicity. "Your eternal radiance," the High Arbiter said carefully. "Perhaps you could clarify your meaning. The Council requires understanding of your reasoning before we can approve. I do not require your approval." The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples of shock spread across the assembled nobles. The Empress had absolute authority in matters of bonding. That was ancient law, but she had always consulted the Council, always followed tradition. "I have waited 400 years, Valithra continued, rising from her throne. She moved with liquid grace, descending the 7 steps that separated her from the petitioner's floor. "From Marcus, I have received 17 proposals from the great houses. I have entertained alliances that would have doubled our territory. I have considered genetic matches that would have strengthened our bloodline for 10,000 generations." She stopped 3 feet from Marcus. Her eyes, vast, ancient, holding colors that human optics couldn't fully process, met his. "And I have rejected them all. Because not one of them, not one saw me." "Your radiance," Lady Sivalith said, her tone honeyed with false concern. "You have been alone too long. The loss of your sister's soul has affected your judgment." "This human cannot possibly—" "This human," Valithra interrupted, "sat with me for 6 hours while I wept for Caleb. He did not offer solutions. He did not speak of politics or advantage. He simply stayed. He brought me water. He covered me with a blanket when I grew cold, though he could not have known that cold affects us at all." Marcus remembered that night. He remembered how small she had seemed, curled in a corner of the observatory, watching the star where her sister's ashes had been scattered. He remembered thinking that grief looked the same in any species. He had not thought about politics. He had simply seen someone in pain. "That is sentiment," Lord Caven said. "Not strategy. It is character," Valithra replied. "And I have learned, after 4 centuries, that character is the only thing that endures." She turned to face Marcus fully. Behind her, the Council erupted into furious whispers, but she ignored them. "Marcus Cole of the human colony Haven's End," she said formally. "I offer you my hand in bonding. I offer you a place beside me on the throne of 7 stars. I offer you dominion over 17 star systems and the loyalty of 9 billion Valithran. She paused, and something flickered in her ancient eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or hope. I offer you my empire as dowry. What do you offer in return? The question hung in the air. Marcus knew what he was supposed to say. The formal acceptance had been drilled into him for weeks. He was supposed to kneel, recite the words of receiving, and pledge his genetic legacy to her line. Instead, he smiled. It was a tired smile, worn at the edges, but genuine. I'd like to ask for something first, if that's allowed. The council's whispers stopped. Even Valithra seemed taken aback. You wish to negotiate? She asked. No, Marcus said. I want to understand something. Before I answer, I need to know. Your grandmother. The one you told me about, who used to make you that soup when you were small. The one who died in the succession wars. Valithra's bioluminescent patterns shifted. A soft, painful amber that Marcus had learned meant grief. What of her? You said it was the only time you ever felt truly safe. That soup, in her kitchen, before you knew what you were going to become. Marcus took a breath. She offered me her empire as dowry. I asked for her grandmother's recipe instead. The silence that followed was absolute. You want... Valithra's voice faltered. Something Marcus had never heard before. You want the recipe? I want to make it for you, Marcus said. I want to learn how. I want to give you one night where you're not the Empress. Where you're just someone who's had a hard day. And someone who cares about you made you soup. He shook his head. I don't want your empire, Valithra. I wouldn't know what to do with it. I was a farmer. I grew things. I fixed irrigation systems. I'm not a consort, and I'm definitely not an emperor. Then what are you? She whispered. Marcus met her eyes. Tired. Lonely. A long way from home. Just like you. For a moment nothing happened. The council watched in stunned silence. The guards stood rigid at their posts. The crystals in the chamber hummed with barely contained energy. Then Valithra laughed. It was not the cold, political laugh Marcus had heard in court. It was raw and broken and surprised, the laugh of someone who had forgotten they could. Lord Caven, she said, not taking her eyes off Marcus. Please inform the council that the bonding ceremony will take place in 3 days. The traditional feast will include a soup course prepared by the human consort. Your Radiance, Caven began. That was not a request. She extended her hand to Marcus. Her fingers were longer than his, cooler than his, and slightly luminescent at the tips. He took it anyway. The Imperial kitchen was a catastrophe of alien biology. Marcus stood before a counter carved from a single piece of what appeared to be living crystal, staring at ingredients that defied his understanding of food. There were vegetables that screamed silently when cut, proteins that changed color based on his emotional state, spices that existed in more than 3 dimensions. The Sivith root must be harvested at the moment of its peak terror, the head chef said, his translated words dripping with contempt. Humans lack the psychic sensitivity to detect. It's not about psychic sensitivity, Marcus interrupted, examining the bulbous purple root in his hand. Look at the color bands. When they vibrate at this frequency, he pointed to the rapid oscillation of the outer ring, that's the moment. The chemistry changes. You can see it if you know what to look for. The chef fell silent. Around them, the kitchen staff, all Valithran, all supremely unimpressed with the human who had dared to enter their domain, exchanged glances. How did you know that? The chef asked eventually. I grew things, Marcus said simply. Different plants, different gravity, different suns. But stress responses are pretty universal. This root is afraid of being eaten. When it's most afraid, its body floods with compounds meant to make it taste terrible to predators. He smiled. But if you cook it right, those same compounds become something else entirely. He didn't mention the years he had spent on Valithran agricultural stations, studying their crops so he could help human colonies trade more effectively. He didn't mention that his understanding of their botany had been born from desperation. The desperate need to find something, anything, that his dying colony could offer the galaxy. Heaven's End had failed anyway. but the knowledge remained. The Empress has sent her grandmother's recipe, the chef said stiffly, handing Marcus a crystalline tablet. It is written in Old Velethran. You cannot possibly. I'll manage. Marcus took the tablet to a corner of the kitchen and sat down. The script was flowing, organic, nothing like the angular modern Velethran he had learned. But Velithra had been teaching him, during their quiet evenings in the observatory. She had been sharing pieces of herself, her history, her people's forgotten past. He hadn't realized until now that she had been preparing him for this. 3 hours later, the chef found him still reading. The tablet displayed not just a recipe but a story, a grandmother's notes to herself, scattered with memories and amendments and small drawings of a child who would one day become an empress. Add extra Caliph spice when she has nightmares, one annotation read. She pretends she is not afraid, but the soup knows. Her eternal radiance approaches, a junior cook announced nervously. Marcus looked up as Velithra entered the kitchen. She had changed from her formal court attire into something simpler, a flowing garment of deep blue that made her bioluminescent patterns stand out like stars. The kitchen staff immediately dropped to their knees. Marcus started to rise, but she waved him back down. Continue, she said. All of you. I am merely here to observe. She moved through the kitchen like a ghost, the staff parting around her with practiced deference. When she reached Marcus, she did not kneel. Empresses did not kneel. But she did sit across from him, folding her long legs beneath her in a way that seemed almost informal. You are studying it, she said, nodding at the tablet. Your grandmother had terrible handwriting. A surprised laugh escaped her. She did. The formal scribes despaired of teaching her proper form. She always said the shapes of words mattered less than their meaning. She sounds like someone I would have liked. She would have terrified you. Velithra's patterns shifted to a warm amber. She terrified everyone. Except me. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Around them the kitchen staff gradually resumed their work, though Marcus could feel their eyes. The council is furious, Velithra said eventually. Lord Caven has formally requested that I submit to a cognitive evaluation. Lady Sivalith is spreading rumors that I have been compromised by human pheromones. Have you? Human pheromones have no effect on Velithran biochemistry. We have verified this extensively. She paused. I volunteered for the study myself. I wanted to be certain that what I feel is and real. Marcus set down the tablet. And what do you feel? For a long moment, she did not answer. When she spoke, her voice was lower, more private. I feel seen. For the first time in 4 centuries, I feel like someone sees me. Not my crown, not my power, not my genetic legacy. Just me. Meow. Her patterns flickered. It is terrifying. I know the feeling. Do you? Do you? She leaned forward slightly. You humans are so strange. You live such brief lives, yet you form attachments as though you have eternity. You love without reservation, without calculation. It is inefficient. It is irrational. It's the only way we know how. Yes. She reached out, hesitated, then let her hand fall back. I have been watching your species since you first ventured beyond your birth world. 73 years by your counting. You are chaotic, contradictory. You destroy each other over trivial differences, yet you will die for strangers without hesitation. We're complicated. You are impossible. Her voice softened. And somehow, that impossibility has walked into my life and offered to make me soup. Marcus picked up the tablet again. Speaking of which, I have questions about this step here. Weep into the broth until the salt content reaches resonance. That's metaphorical, right? No. Oh. Velithra's patterns shifted to something like amusement. The tears of the cook are essential. They bind the emotional intent to the physical substance. Without them, the soup is merely food. Marcus stared at her. You want me to cry into the soup. I want you to feel something while making it. The tears will follow naturally if your heart is engaged. She tilted her head, studying him. Is this beyond your capability? He thought about it. Really thought about it. Then he thought about Heaven's End. About the fields he had planted, the irrigation systems he had built, the community he had helped create, about the blight that had taken everything in 3 terrible months, about the evacuation ships that had come too late for 2/3 of the population, about his sister, who had stayed behind to make sure the children's transport launched safely. "No," he said quietly. "I can manage." Something shifted in Velithra's expression. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. "You lost someone," she said. "I lost everyone." The words hung between them. In the kitchen, the staff continued their work, but their movements had slowed. They were listening. "Is that why you stayed?" Velithra asked. "When you arrived here, seeking trade agreements for a colony that no longer existed? When you had no reason to remain? No home to return to? Is that why you entered the trials?" "Partly." Marcus met her eyes. "Partly. I had nowhere else to go. But partly, yes. Partly I saw someone else who had lost everything. Who wore a crown like armor and called it duty. Who sat alone in an observatory watching a star burn, and never let anyone see her cry." Velithra was very still. "I thought," Marcus continued, "that maybe 2 broken people could be less broken together. I don't know if that's love. I don't know if it's something your species even has a word for. But it's what I have to offer." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The kitchen hummed with quiet activity. The crystal walls reflected their images, fragmented and strange. Then Velithra reached out and, very gently, touched his hand. Her fingers were cool against his skin, slightly luminescent at the tips. The touch was light, almost tentative, nothing like the confident empress who had faced down her council. "We have a word," she said. "Calith Vord. It means the one who sees clearly through the dark. It is considered the highest form of intimacy among my people." "And what does it involve?" "Exactly what you have described." Her patterns shifted to a deep, warm purple he had never seen before. 2 broken things, choosing to be broken together, trusting someone with the pieces. Marcus turned his hand over, let her fingers rest in his palm. "I should warn you," he said. "I'm probably going to ruin this soup. First attempt, alien ingredients, psychic components I don't understand. It's going to be terrible. I know. You'll have to eat it anyway. In front of the entire court. I know. The council will use it as proof that I'm unworthy." Velithra smiled. A real smile, unguarded and warm. "Then we will give them something more interesting to talk about." The night before the bonding ceremony, Marcus couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony of his assigned quarters, a modest space by Velithran standards, merely twice the size of the entire agricultural station where he had spent most of his adult life, and watched the alien stars. Somewhere out there, in a direction he could no longer identify, was the ash cloud that had been Heaven's End. The colony's sun had gone nova 6 months after the evacuation, erasing any evidence that humans had ever lived there. His sister's grave was stardust now. Just like everything else. "You are thinking of them." He didn't turn. He had learned to recognize Velithra's presence by the subtle shift in air pressure, the faint hum of her bioluminescence against the night. "I think of them always," he said. "The nights are worst." She moved to stand beside him, not quite touching. She was dressed in mourning colors, the pale silver that her people wore when remembering their dead. He hadn't known she still observed the old rituals. "I watched my sister die," she said quietly. "The final battle of the succession wars. She was standing beside me when the kinetic round struck. I felt her mind brush against mine one last time, and then silence. I'm sorry. It was 400 years ago. My people would say I should have processed the grief by now. Moved forward. Found closure." Her patterns flickered. "But closure is a lie we tell ourselves. The wound becomes part of you. You simply learn to carry it." "Yeah." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Yeah, that's about right." They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars. In the distance, the crystal spires of the palace complex caught the light of 3 moons, glittering like frozen tears. "Lord Caven has made his move," Velithra said eventually. "He has formally petitioned the High Arbiter to invoke the right of challenge." Marcus turned. "Which is an ancient law. Call. Any noble of sufficient standing may challenge the worthiness of a proposed consort. If the challenge is accepted, the challenger and the challenged must face a trial of equivalence. Combat. Of a sort. The trial is designed to reveal the true nature of both parties. It cannot be refused without forfeiting the bonding. She paused. Kievan believes you will fail. He believes you will shame me before the entire empire, and I will be forced to set you aside. Will I fail? Velithra looked at him. Really looked, with the deep attention she usually reserved for matters of state. I do not know, she admitted. The trial is... Specific. It requires the challenged party to demonstrate their greatest strength. For a Velithran warrior, this would mean combat skill. For a scholar, intellectual prowess. For a diplomat, persuasion. And for a farmer, that is what I do not know. She reached out, touched his shoulder. What is your greatest strength, Marcus Cole of Heaven's End? He thought about it. For a long time, he thought about it. I don't give up, he said finally. Everything falls apart. Everyone leaves. The world ends. And I plant another seed anyway. I fix another broken system. I stay. Even when staying hurts, especially then. He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. My sister used to say I was too stubborn to know when I was beaten. She meant it as a compliment. It is the highest compliment a human can give, I think. Velithra's hand moved from his shoulder to his face, her cool fingers tracing his jaw. Your species' capacity for endurance. It is unlike anything in the galaxy. You break, but you do not shatter. You bend, but you do not bow. We break all the time. We shatter constantly. No. Her voice was fierce. You rebuild. Every time you fall, you rebuild. You take the broken pieces and make something new. It is terrifying and beautiful, and do not understand it, but I have seen it. I see it in you. Marcus leaned into her touch, just slightly. Is that why you chose me? Because I'm stubborn? I chose you because you are kind. She stepped closer, until barely a breath separated them. I have seen stubbornness in many beings. I have seen endurance and strength and resilience. But kindness, genuine, unreserved kindness from someone who has every reason to be bitter, that is rare. That is what I cannot find in my own people. That is what I have been waiting for, though I did not know it until you walked into my court with your borrowed clothes and your quiet dignity and your refusal to be intimidated. I was intimidated, Marcus admitted. I'm still intimidated, I know. She smiled. But you stay anyway. Her lips brushed his forehead, a gesture of profound intimacy among her people, he had learned. A promise of trust. The trial is tomorrow, she said. At dawn. Kievan will try to destroy you. I know. You should prepare. I will. He caught her hand as she began to withdraw. Velithra. Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you. For seeing me. For giving me something to fight for again. Her patterns bloomed into colors he couldn't name. Emotions he couldn't translate. Do not thank me yet, she said. Thank me when you survive. The arena was ancient. Marcus stood at its center, feeling the weight of millennia pressing down on him. The stones beneath his feet had seen 1,000 trials. The air itself seemed thick with judgment. Around him, the assembled nobility of the Velithran Empire watched from crystalline galleries. Lord Kievan stood across the arena, resplendent in ceremonial armor that probably cost more than Marcus's entire colony had been worth. The High Arbiter's voice echoed through the space. The right of challenge has been invoked. Lord Kievan of House Eternal questions the worthiness of Marcus Cole of humanity to stand as consort to her eternal radiance, Empress Velithra of the Seven Stars. The crowd murmured. Marcus couldn't tell if they were excited or disgusted. The challenged party must demonstrate their greatest strength, the Arbiter continued. Lord Kievan, as the challenger, names the form of the trial. Kievan stepped forward, his silver scales gleaming. I name the trial of essence. Let the human show us what he truly is. Let the arena reveal his core nature. More murmuring. Even from a distance, Marcus could see Velithra's patterns shift to anxious amber. The trial of essence. He had asked about it during his preparation. The servants had gone pale. The guards had refused to meet his eyes. It strips away pretense, one elderly courtier had finally told him. It shows everyone who you truly are. Your deepest fear. Your greatest shame. Your secret self. Nothing can be hidden. The arena floor began to glow. Marcus felt it first as warmth, then as intrusion. Something pressing against his mind, his memories, his heart. He tried to resist, but it was like trying to hold back the tide. And then he was falling. He was 13 years old again, watching his mother's ship leave the Haven's End dock. She had promised to come back. She had promised it would only be a few months. She had never come back. He was 22, holding his sister's hand as their father's body was lowered into the colony's recycling system. Resources were scarce. Even the dead served the community. "We'll make it," Sarah had said. "We'll make Haven's End something beautiful." He was 31, standing in a field of withered crops, watching the blight spread across everything he had worked to build. The scientist's report crackled through his comm. Soil contamination. Irreversible. Evacuation is. Adios. Recommended. He was 33, on the last transport off Haven's End, watching Sarah's face through the window as her ship failed to launch. Something in the engine. Something that could have been fixed if there had been more time. "Go," she mouthed through the glass. Life. He lived. He lived through the refugee camps, where humans were third-class citizens. He lived through the labor contracts that were barely better than slavery. He lived through the contempt and the pity and the crushing realization that everything he had loved was gone. And then he lived through the moment he saw Velithra for the first time, not as an empress, but as a woman standing alone in a crowd of sycophants, wearing isolation like a second skin. He lived through choosing to stay. Marcus opened his eyes. He was kneeling on the arena floor, tears streaming down his face. Around him, the galleries were silent. Every noble, every guard, every servant, all of them had seen it. His entire life laid bare. Every failure, every loss, every moment of weakness. Lord Caven stepped forward, triumph written in his posture. "So this is humanity's offering," he said loudly. "A broken creature, a refugee, a man who lost everything and has nothing left to give. This is what our Empress would bind herself to? This is enough." The voice cut through the arena like a blade. Velithra descended from the Imperial Gallery, her patterns blazing with colors Marcus had never seen. Fury, grief, and something else. Something fierce. "You have invoked the trial of essence, Lord Caven. You have seen his truth." She stood before Marcus, then turned to face the crowd. "Now let me tell you what you have witnessed." The arena fell silent. "You have seen a man who lost his mother, his father, his home, his sister, everything, and did not become bitter." Her voice carried to every corner of the space. "You have seen a man who watched his world die and chose to plant seeds anyway. You have seen a man who could have surrendered to despair, to hatred, to the comfortable numbness that protects us from pain." She turned back to Caven, and her next words were ice. "And he chose kindness instead. He chose to see a lonely empress and stay. He chose to sit with her grief, not because it gained him anything, but because it was right." She extended her hand to Marcus, helping him rise. "You call him broken, Lord Caven. You call him weak. But what I see, what any being with eyes to see should recognize, is a man who has faced the abyss and refused to let it consume him." Her patterns shifted to that deep, warm purple again. "That is not weakness. That is a strength our people have forgotten. That is what I choose." The arena erupted, but Marcus barely heard it. He was looking at Velithra, at this ancient and powerful being who had just defended him before her entire empire, and he felt something he had thought he would never feel again. "Hope. The soup," he said quietly, "is probably going to be terrible." She laughed, that raw, surprised laugh that seemed to break something free in her. "Then we will eat terrible soup together," she said. "For as long as the stars burn." The bonding ceremony was 3 hours long. Marcus understood perhaps a quarter of it. He knelt when Velithra knelt. He rose when she rose. He spoke the words he had been taught, hoping his pronunciation wasn't too terrible. He placed his hand over hers, his short human fingers against her long, luminescent ones, and tried to ignore the hundreds of eyes watching their every movement. But through it all, he kept coming back to one thought. After this, he would have to serve the soup. The feast hall was arranged in concentric circles, with the imperial table at the center. Lords and ladies of every great house filled the surrounding rings, their crystalline finery catching the light and fragmenting it into rainbows. Servo drones floated between tables, carrying dishes that Marcus couldn't identify and wasn't sure were meant to be eaten. And at the heart of it all, in a small covered tureen, was his soup. Grandmother Thelithra's recipe. Made with his hands, seasoned with his tears. Genuine tears as it turned out, though not the kind the recipe had intended. He had wept for Sarah while stirring the broth, for his father while adding the caliph spice, for his mother while watching the vegetables reach their peak of terror. The kitchen staff had watched in silence. When he was done, the head chef had tasted it with obvious reluctance. Then he had tasted it again. "It is not traditional," the chef had slowly. "The tears are wrong, the emotion is wrong. But the intent," he had shaken his head. "There is something there. Something I do not recognize." Marcus hoped that something was good enough. "The first course," the High Arbiter announced, "shall be served by the consort's own hand, in accordance with ancient tradition." Marcus rose from his seat. Around the hall, a ripple of anticipation, or possibly derision, passed through the crowd. He could see Lord Caven at the edge of his vision, watching with barely concealed satisfaction. The tureen was lighter than he expected. As he lifted it, the lid chimed softly. A resonance built into the serving ware that was supposed to indicate the emotional quality of the dish. The chime was clear and pure. Marcus didn't know what that meant, but several nearby nobles murmured in surprise. He carried the soup to Velithra. She sat straight in her ceremonial throne, every inch the empress. But when he met her eyes, he saw the woman who had sat with him in the kitchen, who had laughed at his jokes, who had touched his face in the starlight. "Your eternal radiance," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I offer you this soup. It's not perfect. It's probably not even good, but I made it with everything I have." He lifted the lid. The aroma that rose from the tureen was unlike anything he had expected. It was warm and complex and somehow familiar, like childhood memories crystallized into scent. Around him, he heard gasps from the nobility. Velithra's patterns shifted through a dozen colors too quickly to track. "That fragrance," she whispered. "Marcus, how did you—" "I followed the recipe," he said simply. "The part about the tears. I think I understand what your grandmother meant now. It's not about crying into the soup. It's about putting yourself into it. Your real self. The broken parts and the mended parts and everything in between." He ladled the soup into her bowl, his hands only slightly unsteady. "I put heaven's end into this soup. I put Sarah into it. I put every failure and every loss and every stupid decision to keep going anyway." He set down the ladle. "That's what I have to offer. Not an empire. Not genetic legacy. Just me. All of me." Velithra looked at the soup. Then she looked at him. Then, before the entire court, before every lord and lady and noble of her empire, she lifted the bowl to her lips and drank. The hall fell silent. Marcus watched her face, trying to read her alien expressions. Her patterns shifted. Amber, blue, purple, colors he couldn't name. And for a terrible moment he thought he had ruined everything. Then a single tear rolled down her obsidian cheek. "It tastes like her," she said, her voice breaking. "Marcus, it tastes like her. Like her kitchen. Like her hands, like—" She set down the bowl and stood. The court rose with her, confusion and concern rippling through the ranks. The Empress did not cry. The Empress did not show weakness. But Velithra was not showing weakness. She was showing truth. 400 years, she said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. 400 years I have been empress. I have led my people through wars and plagues and upheavals. I have made decisions that cost millions of lives. I have carried burdens that no single being should bear. She stepped down from her throne, moving toward Marcus. And in all that time, not once, has anyone given me back a piece of what I lost. Not once has anyone looked past the crown and seen the child who used to sit in her grandmother's kitchen and feel safe. She stopped before him, and despite her greater height, despite her ancient power, despite everything that separated them, she seemed almost small. Until now. She took his hands in hers. Her grip was trembling. "You asked for a recipe," she said. "A simple thing. A human thing. And in doing so, you gave me back something I thought was gone forever." Her pattern settled into that deep, warm purple. "I do not know what that makes you. I do not know what word encompasses it. But I know what I feel, and I will not hide it." She pulled him closer, until their foreheads touched. "I love you, Marcus Cole. Not because you are strong, not because you are perfect, but because you are kind, and you stayed, and you made me soup that tastes like home." Around them, the hall was silent. Marcus could feel hundreds of eyes, could imagine the scandalized whispers that would follow this moment for generations. He didn't care. "I love you too," he said quietly. "For the record, I still think the soup could have been better." Velithra laughed, that raw, broken, beautiful laugh, and kissed him. It was not a traditional Velithran gesture. It was not dignified or measured or appropriate. It was purely, impossibly human. And somehow, it was exactly right. Later, after the feast had descended into something between celebration and chaos, Marcus found himself on the observatory balcony again. Velithra stood beside him, her formal robes exchanged for the simple blue garment she had worn that night in the kitchen. Below them, the crystal spires of the palace gleamed in the light of 3 moons. Above them, the stars burned with ancient fire. "The council is in disarray," Velithra said. "Lord Caven has retreated to his estates. Lady Sibyleth is already composing messages to the other great houses, trying to salvage her position. Should we be worried? Eventually. Not tonight." She leaned against the railing, and for a moment she looked almost young. "Tonight, I am simply a woman who has eaten very good soup and made an excellent marriage decision. The soup was mediocre at best. The soup was perfect." She turned to look at him. "Because it was made with love. My grandmother would have understood." Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the stars. "I keep thinking about what you said," he admitted, "in the trial. About how I chose kindness when I could have chosen bitterness. But that's not entirely true. I was bitter. I was angry. I blamed everyone and everything for what happened to Heaven's End. And yet you stayed," Velithra said. "You chose to stay with me. To try again. I guess I'm stubborn. You are impossible." She smiled. "You humans, with your brief lives and your endless hope. You have no right to be so resilient. You should have burned out millennia ago, crushed by a universe that does not care. But we didn't. But you didn't." She reached out, took his hand, "And now I understand why. You do not endure because you are strong. You endure because you connect. Because you love, fiercely and foolishly, and without reservation. Because you make soup for grieving empresses, and ask for grandmother's recipes, instead of empires." She squeezed his hand. "That is your gift to the galaxy, Marcus Cole. Not your technology. Not your resources. Your ridiculous, irrational, beautiful capacity for love." Marcus thought about it. About Heaven's End, and Sarah, and all the things he had lost. About the fields he would never see again, the family he would never hold. About the woman standing beside him, ancient and powerful and achingly lonely, who had looked at a broken human and seen something worth keeping. "So, what happens now?" he asked. "I mean, I'm officially your consort. I have no idea what that actually involves. It involves attending many tedious ceremonies, learning several dead languages, occasionally diffusing political crises with your inexplicable human charm. That sounds exhausting." "It will be." She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. But you will also have access to the imperial kitchens. And I believe my grandmother's recipes include several other dishes that I have not tasted in centuries. Marcus smiled. You're bribing me with soup. I'm offering you a purpose. A home. A place where your stubborn refusal to give up might actually be useful. She looked up at him. Is that not what you wanted? He thought about it. Really thought about it. Then he kissed her forehead gently, the way she had kissed his. I wanted to belong somewhere, he said. I wanted to matter to someone. I wanted to stop being alone. And now? Marcus looked at the stars, at the empire spread out beneath them, at the alien woman who had somehow become the center of his universe. Now, he said, I think I want to learn more recipes. Velithra laughed and pulled him closer. Around them, the night was warm and strange and full of possibility. It wasn't the life he had planned. It wasn't the future he had imagined. But it was his, built from broken pieces and stubborn hope and a simple request for something real. She had offered him an empire. He had asked for a recipe. And somehow, against all odds, that had been exactly enough.
Sub, j'ai pas la commande point exclamation sub, elle marche pas encore. Merci Christo pour ton follow, bienvenue à toi. Si, fait il manque la moitié dans le fond. Si on se rend à 150 subs, yo, simply GG with the sub! WD! Petite danse. On s'en va devant le Centre Bell. Aïe, y a-tu de quoi qui m'a piqué l'anus? OK. Devant le Centre Bell, en IRL, pour la game, guys, j'ai mon chandail des Canadiens dans le coffre. Fait qu'il faut se rendre à 150 subs.
Inch'Allah.
OK? Inch'Allah!
Voilà.
Est-ce que tu... Toi, t'es... OK. Yash, aujourd'hui, guys, elle est algérienne. OK?
Je suis algérienne.
Fait que viva l'Algérie!
1, 2, 3, viva l'Algérie! Yes! Tu vois, tu cries ça dans la rue, tout le monde va dire oui. Check, tu veux essayer? Vas-y.
Ouais, hein, c'est moi, faut qu'il le fasse.
Oh, ouais, 100%.
OK. OK, attendez. On va attendre qu'il y ait du monde parce que là, il y a juste moi là, dans le décor, les gars. Là. Je vais attendre.
Vas-y, vas-y, essaye live. Vas-y.
1, 2, 3! Viva l'Algérie!
Wouh! Non? Il n'y a pas assez d'Algérie à Montréal.
1, 2, 3, 4! Vive le Québec!
Okay. Là, c'est pire.
Ouais! Tabarnak! Wouh! Vive le Québec! Voilà! Ouais, là, c'est le Québec, ça marche. Peut-être qu'en Algérie, le monde, il serait peut-être plus hype.
J'ai vu 4 Algériens.